Hi again. When we discuss the population trend theory again and again, there are many limitations. But anyway, the mortality decline is not very necessary, even though the fertility changes are not very theoretical. So the second demographic transition, before that, we saw the one stage 1, 2, 3, 4, saying that the combination between the fertility and the mortality was very big contributing factor of the changes of the population. However, there were many of the shifts of the traditional norm. So, for example, in the very traditional types of the demographic transition theory, they argued that the family formation, so they assumed to have very traditional types of the families. However, so how about the union formation in these days? There would be the former marriages, but there would be also the cohabitation or the living alone and some types of the other families, such as instead of the straight or the different gender or different sex families. But there would be many chances to have the same-sex marriages and the same-sex cohabitations or partnerships. Or many of the baby births out of wedlock, which means not inside of the romantic relationship in the former marriage or others. Some types of the marriages or some types of the live births of the babies would happen outside of the co-residential unions. So these were the new formats of the events. So the second demographic transition said there would be some increase of the birth rates at that point in time. Again, the death rates decline and the more children survive, family work more harder, and there are many of the other types of the factors may contribute the changes to the population. So we cannot say that the population tragedy theory is very perfect, but there would be many types of the differences we can see. All right. So again, this is another the additional resources. We can see that these are the main framework. Many of the framework of the population changes. The health and mortality transition, as we could see in the demographic transition theory, and the age transition, which means some countries would have a larger proportion of the elderly, but some countries would have the lower proportion of the elderly. As we could see the comparison between the Haiti and Japan. And the migration, as you can see in the United States, there are many of the migration issues, the international immigration issues, and the urban transition, comparing the urbanization and the rural area, and the fertility transition, as you could see in the South Korean case, and the family and household transition, which means the formal marriages as a normal form of the union formation in the long time ago, but in these days there are many types of the transitions, transitions in the life course to form the family. Alright, so the population growth rates and the more developed regions and the less developed regions, there are the lower level of the population growth or population increase. But in these days, we can see 0.24, which is very small amount of the percentage, and still the less developed areas, there will be the higher rate of the population change. So the population growth rate of the more developed and less developed regions, we can see the differences. All right, the higher water consumption, more pollution. The population size and resources. Okay, the population size and the space. The numerator is the population size and the denominator is the resources. So in many of the population theories, the population size was very harshly criticized because many of the countries with the high birth rates, they were criticized to contribute to more to the risks of the the survivability of the humankind in the world, on the globe. But the resources, these resources would be very limited at a time. So again, the Thomas Malthus, he worried a lot about the population increase, instead of the contribution of the resources to that. So the major consequences of the population increase is the poverty. So that's why the Malthusian, they worried a lot and they tried to control the increase of the population. However, the Marxian perspective for capitalism, the consequences of the overpopulation is poverty, but for socialism or social-democratic political orientations, population growth is readily observed by the economy with no side effects. So they worried a lot more about the the distribution of the resources instead of the population size. So this is one theory, and there are the 4 types of theory. This is the very optimistic the view of the theory, which means the carrying capacity will not be massive. So it means that even though there would be the increase of the population, anyway, the carrying capacity, which is the capability of the Earth to maintain the humankind in the on the Earth for the survival. So the carrying capacity will be also increasing based on the population history. And even though, and this is another scenario, the sigmoid approach to equilibrium, even though the carrying capacity of the Earth is very, very stable, but the increase of the population, increase of the number of population will remain very stable. So there will be no mismatch, or there will be the reach point of the carrying capacity and the human population, which means the decrease of the population will happen later. However, these are two the pessimistic view of the human population in the future of the human population. So the overshot and oscillation is once once they met together, the Earth, the carrying capacity of Earth will be declined because of the overpopulation. So because of the decreased level of the carrying capacity of the Earth, there will be the decrease of the population, such as climate change or something, anything you can imagine to decline the population. And then because of the decline of the population, there will be the recovery of the carrying capacity, and then the repeats of the increase of the population, and then decrease of the decrease of the carrying capacity, and again. So this is still, even though this is very pessimistic, but we still have some hope. But this is the worst scenario. So once they meet together, the carrying capacity of the Earth will never recover, and then the humankind will be killed a lot. So there will be a very sharp decrease of the population, and they will never come back to the population. So we are not sure. So we are not sure which theory would be more feasible or more reasonable. But we are trying our best to prevent any kind of these kind of pessimistic futures of the population. All right, so more developed area, Europe and others. These are some divisions of the world. And the Western exploitation. Some people, they like Malthusian theory, they criticized a lot about the underdeveloped countries because he believed that these kind of countries are generating too much population, and that will make the big burden to the Earth and the carrying capacity. But context of the social changes growing up, they're unequal encounter with the Western exploitation, because in the human development history, many of those underdeveloped countries were exploited by the Western countries in that point in time, based on the slavery system and based on colonialization. So we are not sure which one would be more feasible or more reasonable to explain some of the human history of the population, but we can see these are issues. So inequality, even in the archaeological sites, there were many of the inequality in the history. So these are the additional readings you can do why there were some types of the inequality, and the Malthus versus Marx, which means the size of the population matters, or the distribution of the population matters. So I'm not sure which one or which theory would you prefer, but there is no one perfect answer on that. So if I would ask you which one would be more reasonable, maybe you can make the explanation based on your clues and based on your thoughts and based on your opinion. All right. So these are all. So thank you very much for your attention and see you in the next topics of the videos. Thank you.